My husband's mistress stood up at a family gathering and made an announcement that froze the room, and in that moment, I knew my marriage had been a lie. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Rachel Miller, and until that night, I believed I was living a normal life. I had been married to Daniel Miller for 12 years. We had a home, shared routines, and what I thought was mutual respect. We were not perfect, but I believed our bond was real. That night was supposed to be simple. Daniel's parents invited close family for dinner. Nothing fancy, just food, laughter, and familiar faces. I wore a calm smile, the kind you wear when you feel safe among people you trust. Lauren Brooks was there too. Daniel had introduced her months earlier as someone from work. She was always around more than necessary, but I told myself I was being insecure. She smiled too much, watched Daniel closely, and spoke as if she already belonged. I ignored the discomfort because I trusted my husband. During dinner, the room was warm and loud. Plates were cleared, drinks were poured, and conversations crossed the table. Then Lauren stood up. She tapped her glass lightly and smiled like she had been waiting for this moment. The room slowly went quiet. Everyone looked at her, confused but polite. She took a deep breath and said she had something important to share. Her voice was steady, almost proud. She spoke about a new beginning, about honesty, and about not hiding anymore. Then she placed a hand on her stomach. She said she was expecting a child. Daniel's child. I felt the air leave my lungs. My heart started racing, but my body went cold. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to stand up, to deny it, to stop her. He didn't. He stayed seated, silent, staring at the table like a man already defeated. Lauren kept talking. She spoke as if I wasn't there. She talked about the future, about building a family, about how things were going to change. Her words erased me piece by piece. Some people gasped. Others avoided my eyes. No one stopped her. I sat there, perfectly still. Inside, everything was breaking, but I refused to let them see it. I felt embarrassed, betrayed, and small, but I also felt something else growing quietly inside me. Clarity. The confusion I had lived with for months suddenly made sense. That was the moment I understood the truth. My marriage was not falling apart that night. It had already been destroyed long before. I just happened to find out in front of everyone. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the life I had built with Daniel and how real it once felt to me. We were married for 12 years, and during that time I gave my whole heart to our marriage. I wasn't naive, and I wasn't living in a fantasy. I knew marriage came with ups and downs, but I truly believed we were facing life together. In the early years, Daniel was caring and present. We planned our future, worked hard, and supported each other through difficult moments. I adjusted my own dreams so his could move forward. When his job demanded longer hours, I understood. When he came home tired and distant, I told myself it was stress. I believed in being patient and loyal, because that is what I thought love required. There were moments when my instincts tried to warn me. He started guarding his personal space more closely. Conversations became shorter, and his laughter felt forced. Sometimes he would leave the room to take calls, and when I asked simple questions, his answers felt rehearsed. None of it was loud or obvious. It was quiet, easy to explain away. I noticed how he stopped asking about my day. The little habits we once shared slowly disappeared. Dinners together became rare. Weekends were often work-related. When I tried to talk about how I felt, he brushed it off gently, telling me I was overthinking and that everything was fine. I wanted to believe him. Trust was something I valued deeply, and I didn't want to become suspicious without proof. I told myself that doubt could damage a marriage faster than silence. So I stayed quiet. I adjusted again. I waited for the man I married to return. Friends would sometimes ask if everything was okay between us. I always said yes. I defended Daniel even when my own heart felt uncertain. I believed loyalty meant standing by your partner, even when things felt uncomfortable. Looking back, I see how many chances I gave him to be honest. I see how often I ignored my own voice because I didn't want my marriage to fail. I thought love meant endurance, and I wore my sacrifices like a badge of honor. What hurts the most is knowing that while I was protecting our marriage, he was slowly stepping away from it. I was holding on with both hands, while he had already let go. I trusted him because I believed what we had was real. I just didn't know I was the only one still living in it. Lauren didn't enter my life all at once. She appeared slowly, in a way that felt harmless at first. Daniel mentioned her name casually, like she was just another person from his workplace. He said she was helpful, friendly, and good at what she did. I didn't think much of it because I trusted him and saw no reason to question a simple explanation. Over time, her name came up more often. Stories about work somehow included her presence again and again. I noticed how his tone changed when he spoke about her, softer and more animated. I told myself I was imagining it. I didn't want to read meaning into small things. The first time I met Lauren was at a small gathering. She smiled wide and held eye contact a second too long. Her voice was sweet, but something about her made me uneasy. She acted comfortable around Daniel, like familiarity came naturally to her. She laughed at his jokes before he finished them. She stood close, closer than necessary. As weeks passed, she became part of our shared spaces. She was invited to dinners and family events, always with a reason that sounded reasonable. She spoke to me politely, but there was a quiet confidence in her tone, as if she already knew something I didn't. Sometimes she would correct me about Daniel's preferences, or finish his sentences without hesitation. I started noticing the looks. Quick glances between them. Smiles that didn't include me. Moments when conversations would stop when I entered the room. None of it was obvious enough to accuse, but all of it left a weight in my chest. There was also a subtle disrespect I couldn't explain at the time. She would speak over me or dismiss my opinions with a light laugh. She would mention future plans as if she were already included. Daniel never corrected her. He never set boundaries. He let it happen. I remember one moment clearly. Lauren referred to our home as Daniel's place, even though it was ours. She said it casually, like it was a mistake, but Daniel didn't fix it. He just smiled. That smile stayed with me long after the night ended. I felt like a guest in my own life. I questioned myself constantly. I wondered if I was being too sensitive or territorial. I didn't want to appear insecure, so I stayed quiet and watched. Now, looking back, every uncomfortable moment makes sense. The closeness, the confidence, the way she moved through my world without hesitation. She wasn't stepping into my life by accident. She was already living a part of it, and I was the only one who didn't know. The truth didn't come to me in one dramatic moment. It came quietly, through things I saw and conversations I overheard. One afternoon, I went to surprise Daniel at his office with lunch. I had done it before, and he always said it made his day better. That time, his reaction was different. His smile was stiff, and he seemed nervous, like I had caught him off guard. While we were standing near the entrance, Lauren walked out of a nearby room. She stopped when she saw me. There was a pause, heavy and uncomfortable. She looked at Daniel, not me, and in that look, I saw familiarity that went far beyond work. It wasn't friendly or casual. It was intimate. They both tried to act normal, but their tension spoke louder than words. Later that week, I attended a small work-related dinner with Daniel. Lauren was there again. At one point, she leaned in and whispered something to him. He smiled in a way I hadn't seen in months. When he noticed me watching, he quickly looked away. That was when my heart sank. No explanation could cover what I felt in that moment. The final confirmation came from a conversation I was never meant to hear. I walked into a quiet hallway at a restaurant, looking for the restroom, and heard voices behind a door. It was Daniel and Lauren. They were arguing in low tones, but their words were clear enough. They spoke about time they spent together, about promises, and about being careful. I stood there, frozen. I didn't move or make a sound. My hands were shaking, but my mind felt strangely calm. Everything I had sensed for months came together in that moment. There was no doubt left to question. I didn't confront Daniel that night. I didn't cry or scream. I went back to the table, sat down, and finished the evening like nothing had happened. On the drive home, he talked about small, meaningless things. I listened and nodded, even though my chest felt heavy. In the days that followed, I watched him more closely. I paid attention to his words and actions. I noticed how carefully he chose his excuses and how easily he lied. I also noticed how confident Lauren had become, as if she believed the truth would stay hidden. Inside, I was breaking, but I stayed quiet. I knew reacting too quickly would only give them control. I needed time to think, to understand the full picture, and to protect myself. Silence became my strength. The betrayal hurt deeply, but it also opened my eyes. I stopped seeing the man I loved and started seeing the man he had become. And once I saw the truth clearly, I knew I would never be the same again. The family event was planned weeks in advance. It was formal, with carefully set tables, quiet music, and relatives dressed in their best clothes. I arrived beside Daniel, calm on the outside, carrying a storm inside me. I had already accepted the truth, but no one else knew what I knew. Lauren was there too. She looked confident, almost glowing, like someone waiting for applause. She greeted everyone warmly and barely acknowledged me. I stayed polite and distant. I didn't want attention. I just wanted the evening to pass. After dinner, when people were relaxed and talking, Lauren stood up. She tapped her glass gently, just like someone who believed the room belonged to her. Conversation slowly stopped. All eyes turned toward her. I felt my body tense, but I kept my face steady. She smiled and said she had news to share. Her voice was clear and controlled. She spoke about honesty and new beginnings, using words that sounded practiced. Then she placed her hand on her stomach and said she was pregnant with Daniel's child. The room reacted instantly. Gasps filled the air. Some people looked shocked. Others looked confused. A few glanced at me, then quickly looked away. My heart pounded, but I stayed seated, gripping my hands under the table. Lauren continued speaking. She talked about the future like it was already decided. She hinted that changes were coming and said life sometimes moves people aside to make room for what's next. Her eyes flicked toward me for just a second. That was enough. I turned to Daniel. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to say something, anything. He didn't. He sat there in silence, his face pale, his eyes fixed straight ahead. In that moment, his silence hurt more than her words. I felt exposed, like my private pain had been turned into public entertainment. I could feel the weight of everyone's attention, even when they tried not to stare. My name wasn't mentioned, but my presence was clearly inconvenient. Still, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't leave. I sat there with my back straight and my head held high. Inside, I felt humiliated, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. When the announcement ended, the room slowly returned to quiet conversation, but the mood had changed. People spoke softly, unsure of what to say. Some avoided me completely. Others offered awkward smiles. I stayed until the end. When it was time to leave, I stood up calmly and said goodbye like nothing had happened. On the drive home, Daniel didn't speak. Neither did I. That night, I understood something clearly. They thought I had been pushed aside. They thought I was done. But humiliation did not destroy me. It sharpened me. And while they believed they had won, I was only just beginning to take my power back. What Daniel and Lauren never understood was that my silence did not mean weakness. While they believed I was confused and broken, I was paying attention. I had learned long ago that survival sometimes means staying calm and thinking clearly, even when your heart is hurting. From the moment I accepted the truth, I began protecting myself. I kept track of important details, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Dates, conversations, and changes in behavior were written down quietly. I saved documents related to our home, finances, and shared responsibilities. I made sure I understood what belonged to me and what I had a right to protect. I didn't do this in secret to hurt anyone. I did it because I knew I needed stability. I refused to let my future depend on people who had already proven they couldn't be trusted. I spoke carefully when I needed information and listened more than I talked. The more they believed I was unaware, the more careless they became. Daniel thought I was too emotional to notice details. Lauren assumed I was too hurt to think straight. That assumption became my advantage. They spoke freely around me, confident that I was no longer paying attention. I let them believe that. I also prepared myself emotionally. I stopped asking Daniel for explanations I knew would never be honest. I stopped hoping he would suddenly become the man I married. Instead, I focused on myself. I reminded myself of who I was before my life revolved around his choices. Every step I took was quiet and intentional. I didn't rush. I didn't act out of anger. I wanted clarity, not chaos. I wanted control over my next move, not regret over a careless reaction. There were nights when the weight felt unbearable. I cried alone, but even then, I didn't lose focus. Pain didn't distract me from the truth. It strengthened my resolve. I knew that when the time came, I wanted to stand on solid ground. They believed I had accepted defeat. They believed I was stepping aside. In reality, I was building a foundation they couldn't shake. I wasn't planning revenge fueled by emotion. I was planning freedom built on preparation. By the time they realized I wasn't as powerless as they assumed, it would already be too late. I had learned something important through all of this. Underestimating a quiet woman is the biggest mistake anyone can make. The moment to speak came sooner than they expected. Another family gathering was arranged, meant to celebrate upcoming changes. The same people were there, sitting in the same familiar room, but this time, I walked in with a calm I had never felt before. I didn't raise my voice or demand attention. When the conversation naturally paused, I stood up and asked if I could say something. My tone was steady. That alone made people listen. I spoke slowly and clearly. I didn't accuse or insult. I simply shared facts. I explained when certain promises were made and how timelines overlapped in ways that couldn't be denied. I described situations they had witnessed without understanding at the time. Faces in the room began to change as pieces came together. Lauren tried to interrupt me at first. She smiled tightly and said I was confused. I looked at her and calmly corrected the details she got wrong. Each correction weakened her confidence. The room grew quiet again. Then I turned to Daniel. I didn't ask him to explain himself. I explained him. I spoke about decisions he made and words he used, repeating them exactly as they were said. He looked stunned, like a man seeing his reflection clearly for the first time. His silence confirmed everything. People started asking questions, not out of curiosity, but out of disbelief. I answered without emotion. I wasn't there to convince anyone. I was there to tell the truth. Lauren's story began to fall apart. The timing didn't match what she had claimed. Her version of events shifted as she tried to defend herself. The confidence she once had disappeared. She avoided eye contact and struggled to keep her voice steady. Daniel finally spoke, but it was too late. His words sounded empty. Excuses didn't carry weight anymore. The room understood what had happened without anyone needing to say it directly. I sat down after I finished. I felt no rush of victory, only relief. The truth no longer lived inside me alone. It was shared, seen, and understood. In that moment, Daniel realized something he never expected. He had underestimated me. He thought I would stay quiet forever. He thought I would protect his image at the cost of my own dignity. He was wrong. I didn't need anger to reclaim my voice. I only needed the truth. After the truth was spoken, nothing stayed the same. The calm image Daniel had carefully built began to fall apart. People who once trusted him started to question his actions. Conversations became distant, and support quietly disappeared. He was forced to face the results of choices he thought would remain hidden. Serious matters followed. Agreements he had ignored were brought forward. Responsibilities he tried to avoid could no longer be pushed aside. He realized too late that silence and denial had a cost. The confidence he once carried was replaced by stress and regret. He wasn't in control anymore. Lauren's future also changed quickly. The story she told so proudly could not survive once people understood the full picture. The sympathy she expected never arrived. Instead, she faced uncomfortable questions and cold reactions. Invitations stopped. Conversations ended when she entered a room. The image she tried to create for herself slowly collapsed. Without secrecy, her confidence disappeared. She was no longer admired or supported. The plans she believed were secure suddenly felt uncertain and fragile. I didn't celebrate their struggles. I simply stepped back and watched. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one carrying shame. People began to see me differently. They approached me with quiet understanding instead of awkward silence. Some apologized for not speaking up earlier. Others admitted they had sensed something was wrong but didn't know how to respond. I accepted their words without bitterness. My goal was never approval. It was peace. Daniel tried to reach out to me during this time. His tone had changed. There was regret in his voice, but it came too late. I listened, but I didn't comfort him. The consequences he faced were his to carry, not mine to fix. Lauren avoided me completely. The confidence she once used to walk through my life was gone. There was nothing left to say between us. What surprised me most was how naturally the balance shifted. I didn't have to demand understanding. Once the truth was visible, people adjusted their view on their own. I learned that dignity has a quiet power. When you stand firm without attacking or begging, the truth does the work for you. The consequences weren't something I created. They were simply the result of choices finally being seen for what they were. Walking away was not sudden or dramatic. It was a quiet decision I made after everything became clear. I didn't need permission, and I didn't need to explain myself anymore. For the first time in years, my choices were guided by what I needed, not by what others expected from me. I chose stability over chaos. I made sure my life was built on solid ground, free from uncertainty. I focused on creating a space where I felt safe and respected. Every step forward reminded me that I was capable of standing on my own. I didn't argue with Daniel or ask him to understand my pain. I didn't beg for apologies that wouldn't heal me. I simply drew boundaries and kept them. Silence became my strength again, but this time it was peaceful, not painful. There was a sense of dignity in leaving without bitterness. I didn't raise my voice or demand sympathy. I walked away with my head high, knowing I had stayed true to myself. That quiet confidence mattered more than any argument I could have won. Choosing myself wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt and loneliness, but even those moments felt honest. I was no longer living in confusion. I wasn't waiting for someone else to choose me. I began rebuilding my life with intention. Small routines brought comfort. Clear decisions brought relief. Each day, I felt stronger and more grounded. The weight I had carried for so long slowly lifted. What I gained wasn't revenge. It was self-worth. I learned that strength doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like calm acceptance and firm boundaries. By walking away on my own terms, I reclaimed control over my future. I didn't lose anything of value. What I left behind was betrayal, not love. In choosing myself, I didn't just survive the betrayal. I rose above it. Life after leaving Daniel and Lauren wasn't perfect, but it was mine, fully and freely. I started small, focusing on the things I had neglected for years: my home, my routines, and most importantly, myself. Each day became a step forward, a reminder that I was no longer trapped by their choices or lies. I began surrounding myself with people who truly cared, who offered support without judgment. Friends and family who had once seemed distant came closer once they saw I was no longer hiding in fear or shame. Their presence reminded me that I wasn't alone, and that the world had room for honesty and loyalty. Every day brought a sense of clarity I had never experienced before. I reflected on the mistakes I had made, not to blame myself, but to understand and learn from them. I realized that strength isn't about proving someone wrong, it's about proving to yourself that you can survive, that you can rebuild, and that you can thrive. I didn't rush into anything. I allowed myself time to heal, to process the betrayal and the heartbreak. Tears came, yes, but they were cleansing. Each one was a release, not a sign of weakness. I began to trust my instincts again, listening to that quiet voice I had ignored for too long. Work, hobbies, and small personal victories became my focus. I discovered new passions, rediscovered old ones, and allowed myself the freedom to dream again. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer defined me. It had shaped me into someone wiser, someone stronger, someone unwilling to settle for less than respect and honesty. Daniel and Lauren faded from my daily thoughts. Their attempts to control or manipulate me had backfired. They had tried to replace me, to diminish my place, but in reality, all they did was reveal who they truly were. Their betrayal showed their true character, while I was free to show mine: resilience, integrity, and courage. I started planning for the future I wanted: peaceful, independent, and self-respecting. I realized that freedom wasn't just leaving a toxic situation, it was taking full responsibility for my happiness. I didn't need their approval, their love, or their lies to define me anymore. In the end, the greatest victory wasn't revenge or punishment. It was life itself. Walking forward without fear, without shame, and without dependence became my triumph. I had reclaimed my story. I had reclaimed myself. I learned that those who try to replace you can never truly succeed if you remain grounded in your own truth. Their deception only strengthens you when you refuse to let it break you. And that is exactly what I did. I healed, I moved forward, and I became unstoppable.